What if I told you that the most important video game of 2025 was made by fewer than 30 people, on a budget smaller than most Hollywood catering bills, by a studio that had never shipped a single game before? What if I told you it outsold everything else that year, topped Spotify charts with its soundtrack, swept the Game Awards, and earned a personal congratulations from the President of France? This is the story of Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, a game that had no right to be this good. And yet, here we are. Stick around, because this story goes from a bored developer locked down during COVID, to a Reddit message that changed everything, to a worldwide phenomenon that nobody saw coming. This is how Expedition 33 was born, built, and broke the internet. The world they built. Before we talk about how this game got made, you need to understand what it is, because the concept alone is unlike anything else in gaming. Clair Obscur is set in a place called Lumiere, a dreamlike, crumbling version of Belle Epoque Paris, where the Eiffel Tower and Arc de Triomphe have been warped and twisted by some ancient catastrophe. Think Paris, but broken. Beautiful and broken. And looming on the horizon? A monolith. A massive structure with a glowing number on its face. Each year, a mysterious entity known only as the Paintress emerges, and she lowers that number by 1. And here's the horrifying part. Whatever number she paints, everyone of that age dies instantly, turning to smoke and crimson petals. She's been doing this for 67 years. The game begins when she paints the number 33. So you play as the members of Expedition 33, a group of soldiers, scientists, and survivors who volunteer for what is essentially a suicide mission. Every previous expedition has failed. None have returned. But if you're 33 years old, what do you have to lose? It's a premise soaked in grief, mortality, and the terrifying beauty of a countdown you can't stop. And that emotional weight, that's not an accident. Because the man behind this story built it from the ground up in his bedroom, alone during a pandemic. The origin, from bedroom to studio. The year is 2019. Guillaume Broche is working at Ubisoft, one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, and he is bored. Not bored in the lazy sense. Bored in the way that creative people get bored when they know they have something bigger inside them. So he starts tinkering. Late nights, weekends, he opens Unreal Engine in his bedroom and starts building. His first prototype is called We Lost. Even then, in that raw, rough, early version, you can see the DNA of Expedition 33, the turn-based combat with real-time elements, the character names, the emotional core. It was all there from day one. But Guillaume can't do this alone. So he does something that, honestly, feels almost too mundane for such a monumental origin story. He starts sending messages on Reddit, cold messages to strangers on online forums for indie developers. And one of those messages lands in the inbox of a programmer named Tom Gillerman. Tom is a longtime friend of Guillaume. He reads the message, plays the prototype, and immediately understands what Guillaume is trying to build. He joins the project. Then Francois Meres follows, leaving his previous job to come on board. And just like that, 3 guys with a vision and a passion found Sandfall Interactive. The studio's name? It came from the very first Unreal Engine project of Guillaume. He'd called it Sandfall, and the name stuck. Now, here's the kicker. The conventional wisdom at that time was that turn-based RPGs were dead. Publishers didn't want them. Players, supposedly, didn't want them. The genre's golden age was the late 90s and early 2000s, with franchises like Final Fantasy. After that, the industry shifted hard toward real-time action RPGs. Elden Ring, not Persona, was the template the industry was chasing. But Guillaume didn't care. He made the game he wanted to play. And that stubbornness, that creative conviction, is what makes this story so remarkable. Building the game, combat, engine, and a tiny team. Let's talk about what makes Expedition 33 actually work as a game because the design choices here are genuinely bold. Guillaume and Tom had a problem with classic turn-based combat. It's great for strategy, but it can feel passive. You pick a move, watch the animation, wait for the enemy to respond. You're a spectator in your own game. They wanted to fix that. Their solution? Make every single moment of combat interactive. When you attack, you're executing quick-time inputs to maximize your damage. It's rhythmic, it's kinetic, it feels incredible. When the enemy attacks you, and this is where it gets really special, you can dodge, parry, or jump, depending on the incoming move. Nail a perfect parry at the right moment, and you don't just block. You completely negate the damage and counter with a devastating attack of your own. The inspiration? Games like Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, Paper Mario, and the cult classic Lost Odyssey. But no game before Expedition 33 had ever demanded this level of precision and engagement from a turn-based format. Tom remembers the exact moment they knew it worked, an early playtesting session where the whole team passed a controller around trying to beat a boss. People were hyped, competitive, invested. That was the moment it clicked. And the team building this? Never more than 30 people at peak production. Split between an office in Montpellier and a smaller team in Paris. The budget? Under $10 million, in a world where other titles routinely spend $200 million. To pull it off, they leaned hard into Unreal Engine 5, specifically Lumen for real-time global illumination, Nanite for detailed environments, and MetaHuman for their photorealistic characters. The cinematic sequences were built using motion capture, including facial capture, processed through MetaHuman Animator, giving the characters an emotional expressiveness that rivals anything from a studio 10 times their size. Even the music system was built inside Unreal, using meta sounds to create a fully dynamic soundtrack that transitions seamlessly between exploration, combat, and cinematics, always responding to what's happening on screen. For a debut title from a tiny studio, the technical ambition is staggering, and somehow they pulled it off. The music, Lorien Testard, and the sound of a masterpiece. If the gameplay is the backbone of Expedition 33, the music is its soul. And you cannot tell the story of this game without talking about Lorien Testard. Lorien is self-taught. He started learning musical composition at 16, posted tracks to SoundCloud at a rate of about 1 per week for a year, and one of those tracks ended up on an indie game forum in early 2020, where Guillaume Broche was browsing. Guillaume heard it, reached out, and asked Lorien to join the project. That was the beginning of a 5-year collaboration that would produce one of the most celebrated video game soundtracks in recent memory. And the scope of this soundtrack is jaw-dropping. 154 unique songs. Genres ranging from classical opera to heavy metal, jazz, electronic dance music, neoclassical, and everything in between. Each environment in the game has its own musical identity. Each character has their own leitmotif, a recurring melody that carries their emotional story across the entire game. Lorien was also joined by Alice Deporte-Percier, a vocalist he discovered through YouTube videos. They started communicating over email, and Alice eventually became co-composer, lending her voice to some of the most emotionally devastating moments in the entire game. Lorien's belief was simple. The human voice is the most direct connection to the heart. And if you've heard Lumiere or Alicia, the main menu theme, written in an invented language specifically to feel universal, you'll know exactly what he means. The game's pandemic context plays directly into this music. COVID hit early in development. Lorien was a guitar teacher. His students couldn't come in, so he quit teaching and threw himself into composing full-time. In a way, the same pandemic that locked the world down gave Expedition 33 its full musical heart. By release, over 30 musicians and a 9-person choir had collaborated on the score. Physical vinyl releases were announced. An orchestral concert tour launched in October 2025. The soundtrack topped Spotify viral charts. This was not background music. This was an event. The story. Grief, art, and a choice that destroys you. Now, the story. And look, I'll try to keep spoilers light here, but some context is necessary to understand why this game hit people so hard. On the surface, Expedition 33 is a classic Save the World RPG. Gustav leads the expedition. He's joined by Mael, Loon, Seal, and others, each with fully realized backstories, complex relationships, and arcs that unfold through campfire conversations and flashbacks. The voice cast alone is extraordinary. Charlie Cox, Jennifer English, Andy Serkis, Ben Starr, bringing these characters to life with a restraint and gravity that makes every moment feel earned. But the game is not what it first appears to be. Gustav dies at the end of Act 1. And what follows? The revelations about who the paintress really is, what Lumiere really is, and what the player's own immersion in the story actually means veers into philosophy. That owes as much to Sartre and Descartes as it does to Final Fantasy. The world of Lumiere, it turns out, is a painting. A canvas created by a grieving mother named Aline, who inhabits it as the paintress. Every person in Lumiere is an echo, a brushstroke of her imagination, her grief, her love. And the expedition to stop her? It's her son Verso leading characters he painted, including, unknowingly, his youngest sister, through a world that was never meant to end. The final choice the game gives you is devastating. Destroy the canvas and force the family back to reality, or preserve it and let the painted world live on. There is no good ending. There is only what you can live with. Director Guillaume Broche pitched the game to composer Lorien Testard with one sentence. You arrive at the beginning of the game after the heroes have already lost. That sentence is Expedition 33 in its entirety. The success, a phenomenon nobody saw coming. So, April 24th, 2025, Expedition 33 launches. 1 million copies sold in 3 days. Reviews are unanimous, not just good, but generational. Critics called it a peer of Final Fantasy at its absolute peak. Some called it better. 6 million copies sold by end of year, making it the defining single-player release of 2025, outselling every other title in its space by a significant margin. The soundtrack tops Spotify viral charts. Physical stock sells out. The Game Awards come around, and Expedition 33 sweeps the room, taking Game of the Year over Death Stranding 2 and Hollow Knight, Silksong. And then Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, publicly congratulates Sandfall Interactive. For a 30-person studio making their debut game, that is not a sentence that should ever exist in reality. But it does. Because this game did something games almost never do anymore. It surprised everyone. Publishers said turn-based RPGs were over. The conventional wisdom said small studios couldn't compete with blockbuster franchises. And Sandfall Interactive, in their first outing with less than $10 million, proved all of that wrong. Hollywood has already come knocking. Story Kitchen, the production company specializing in video game adaptations, is handling a live-action film adaptation. Sandfall Interactive is now a franchise. This is just the beginning. Claire Obscure Expedition 33 is proof that conviction matters more than budget. That the right story told by the right people, even 30 of them in an office in Montpellier, can shake the entire industry. The paintress painted the number 33, and in 2025, Expedition 33 painted something on gaming history that isn't going away anytime soon.